And that's a super common issue, the FOMO, the AI FOMO, like train us on AI and enable everyone how to use AI. And the question in my mind keeps coming back to for what?
Yeah.
Like motion and activity does not equal progress. So like, let's make sure that we're identifying use cases. Let's make sure that we're actually doing something valuable with this tool rather than just doing stuff with it.
Yes. I had the opportunity over the weekend to talk to Eric Ries, the lean startup author,
Oh, yeah, cool.
and really thoughtful, everything you would expect of him, very kind. We were talking about examples at companies where they're encouraging AI adoption. And one of the most common metrics for AI adoption is just like token usage, like how many tokens you're using.
Right, right.
And it seems almost like so fundamental of like what should you measure error that's happening right now of like
Yeah,
you kind of understand why we got to this place where everyone's saying, "Hey, we just want everybody on like basically token max to your heart's content." And at
yeah,
some point, like when are all these companies going to look at the bill and say, "Wait a second, like did we want to pay X millions upon millions of dollars for
right.
people to get adopted to this as opposed to a much more intentional approach?" It seems like it's not that much more effort or time past the, hey, we want everybody to use AI to then say, in what ways and how do we want to get everybody on board with this? That isn't, hey, let's spend an absurd amount of money on tokens for tokens' sake.
I tried to do this with one of the private equity firms that I work with that is trying to encourage AI enablement and AI adoption across all the portfolio companies. Yes, we can track token usage. You know if somebody's using the thing, but taking that next step to figure out like what are they using it for and is it something useful all of a sudden becomes really manual and really subjective and like converting that into something useful. Like maybe we should ask AI how to categorize and track it in a more useful way. But that's something that we really struggled with in the portfolio that I led some of that work with. And so we're capturing all sorts of use cases in a big, complicated table. And it's then hard to translate that into benefit and ROI. We're trying to do it with like man hours and vendor spend that we're not doing and incremental revenue. And it's very manual and it's very complicated to try to track something other than token usage.
It is hard because I'm even thinking like if you were to try to track like how beneficial is PowerPoint or Excel or
Right.
any of those tools, how would we go about that today? And so I think it begs the question of how much is that the problem or the question that we need to be answering long term? Like I understand why we're going through the effort and trying to quantify it right now for companies and to
Yeah.
understand this technology. But the longer term, I'm not sure it's actually the right thing for us to focus on for an organization.
I love the analogy. AI is a tool like email, like Excel and PowerPoint. And like, what is the benefit of having email, Excel, PowerPoint? Massive. But how do you prove out the ROI of that? That's trickier for sure.
There is something interesting. So Eric Ries's new book is called Incorruptible, and one of the most like kind of resonant concepts in it is this idea of financial gravity. That depending on where the financial forces are, you can pull people to different behaviors, and that in turn then affects like company cultures and sustainability of it and all of that. And I liked that term of gravity of like where are we pulling, and this example of like companies who are saying, hey, go token max. There is no gravity, right? There's nothing to pull you back to a financial underpinning of like, and here's where we want it to go. And he gave this great example. There was some tool that with each prompt, it would say, hey, this is going to cost you like $2.50. Do you want
Uh,
to do it? Or this is going to cost a fraction of a penny. Do you want to do it?
yeah.
And with that, you immediately are like, I don't care enough to pay $2 for that answer. But this one, oh, sure. How do I have more questions like this that are like fractions of pennies where, yeah, I would love to know that. There's a tool I've been using lately called Town. They just raised a Series A. And for the first stretch, it was like free to use. And I was automating things to my heart's content. And so then I started refactoring all of my automations to be much, much lower because I had financial gravity to then pull me in a way that changed my
Right. Right.
behavior. And it doesn't always have to be financial gravity, but I think some kind of metrics or incentive gravity is what we, for many years in the people world, have worked with and tried to use as a way to increase performance and productivity and effectiveness. And now this is interesting in an AI context of like, how do you create that gravity within an organization to pull people to use these tools in a more meaningful way?
Two thoughts. One, we just did a AI demo day within the PLA community where alumni were showing what they've built. One thing that came up through the most recent version of that, shout out to Jake Becker, he asked the LLM to be conscious of token usage
Oh.
and put together solutions and answers that conserve tokens unless he requests otherwise. And so that's like one of his standing like baseline foundational prompts, which I thought was smart.
Really smart. I love the simplicity of it. When you hear it, you're like, oh, that's such a good idea. Why doesn't that just get built into the system as a default?
Yeah. Another vendor that is doing something interesting in this space, Skill, like the word skill, and V is VEE. They're very early stage, but they have a product that gives a prompt for some type of work product. And then the AI will watch how you do the work. So what tools are you using? How efficient are you with it? Are you doing something that's like totally non-compliant in some way? And how are you getting to your answer? It's like the ultimate like show your work type of job interview tool. And so I could imagine that being great for recruiting and for development if you're trying to emphasize skill building. That was really interesting. And, another great way for AI to track the usage of AI.
I like this thread that you're pulling, which is how do we use the tool to actually monitor and support the use of the tool? I think that's sort of the meta part that this year has become more and more salient around. If you have a question around how to use Claude or how to use ChatGPT or Gemini, like just ask. If I don't know how to do this thing in Gemini, I just ask exactly my question and hit enter and boom. I don't know about for you, but for me, that was just like mind-bogglingly cool. Like, wow, I don't have to go anywhere else or ask anyone else for an answer. The other thing I was going to mention, and maybe this is like totally unrelated in a sense of it's not business, it's not anything else, but it's part of what I've found to be pretty addictive about using AI is that I don't have to go anywhere else. Like, especially if I'm vibe coding, like an app for fun type of thing, and like go into all hours of the night because I'm just like, I can just be in my own world with my thoughts and this amazing AI thing. One of my friends said, it's crazy how much even more addictive it is than it can be like being on like TikTok or YouTube Shorts or something like that, where you're scrolling, like because it's so engaging and engaging in your brain in a totally different way.
I'm having kind of the opposite experience at the moment. I find that chat was almost immediately responsive. It would immediately come back with text. And that allowed me to have what I felt was like more of a natural conversation. I'd ask a question, it gives me pretty much an immediate answer. And then I follow up with, some feedback, or I only read through the first 2 paragraphs before I find something that I don't like. And then I send something back. And it was more of a real-time exchange. In Claude, it thinks a lot more, and it gives me often a more succinct and better answer, and it's, doing documents and work product for me. But I've got to like walk away. I cannot stand there and look at the thing spinning for 3 minutes or 6 minutes. So it's less addictive to me. It's like having a commercial in the old days. The commercial came on, that's when you go get a drink of water or go to the bathroom. And hopefully the commercial's over by the time you come back.
I'm jealous of your ability to just pull yourself out of it and not just stare at the thing that's going while it's thinking. Because like for vibe coding or for actually this other tool I was mentioning, Town, they'll have elements where it's telling you what it's doing and what it's thinking about. There was one thing I ran because it was pulling tons of data for me that took like 20 minutes for it to do, where I was like, I should probably pull myself away and do something else. That is a skill that I've talked to some of my clients about, where you're running, half a dozen agents, and as each of them's going, you're kind of bouncing between them. which is a whole different skill of context switching that takes us down a different path of topics.
It potentially links into something that we started before we pressed record. The idea of seeing the AI do its work. And then there are these tech vendors that have the humans show how you're doing the work. In the school system, I have a middle schooler now, and they're really worried at school that the kids are just going to ask AI a question and copy and paste.
Yeah.
And so if AI is watching you do your work, AI knows whether you're just copying and pasting after one prompt or you refining and pressure testing and like getting to a better answer. And before we press record, and maybe here's the full circle, we were talking about, the middle school version of you. And with AI, is the middle school version of us the cut and paste, like ask one simple question and then get the answer? Or was our version, I'm guessing that both of us were the overachiever that was doing the extra credit assignment and coloring on it as well. And these new tools are blessings, and they're a tremendous opportunity for distraction as well.
And I think that's the exploration that's going on in organizations right now of like, what is this tool and where does it benefit us? And I think the distraction element of, being addicted late into the night in some ways is just like kind of the next version of, I remember my early startup days where I was just deep in whatever project planning or execution of a project type of thing and really getting deep into it. And it's the accelerated version of that. And maybe this takes us to a different topic we've talked about before of just the speed at which everything's going at these days and how much of it is a benefit and how much of it is maybe a danger.
Yeah, I mean, speed can be dangerous. You can get to the wrong place faster. You can get off track faster. But generally, I would think, that horsepower, that speed is a benefit. Because if you do have the right direction, then you'll get to where you're going faster.
That caveat you're putting in of if you have the right direction is a really important one, though. That's
clarity. I talk about the 4 C's, and our friend Brad Harris, just told me that he's been teaching this in exec ed through HEC Paris, that the 4 C's, clarity, communication, consistency, and consequences. These are essential for management of even a moderately complicated organization or project. And it starts with clarity. Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish? And I don't know, we'll probably come up with some sort of rubric, or maybe he already has, in terms of like, how much of these things do you have and what are some core tools around it? But yeah, if AI is a tool and it helps us get somewhere faster, doesn't it make sense that we should be like really clear about where it is that we're trying to get to or what it is that we're trying to do?
That resonates so much. The 4 C's are super useful. And the corollary I'm thinking about is it's really useful from a management technique to have those 4 C's in place as you're talking to your team, but also useful as you're talking to AI, that we have clarity on what it is and that we're communicating what we need. And especially, I think the other part of the consequences in particular was like, oh, what are the consequences for AI if it's not doing things? And I actually have spent a good amount of time with some of my own AI setup of like, what are the guardrails here? If there's a system that's running and it gets into a weird loop and it's going and going and going, like there should be some sort of pullout on that, some exit to know like, hey, if you've done this for over a minute or you've done this X number of times, like we need something else to be happening. And so having each of those structured and laid out and articulated and put in place, I like that framework of the 4 C's to be able to come back to, regardless of whether it's with a human team, or if it's an AI agent team that you're thinking about.
Something sparked as you were talking about that, the idea of a kill switch. Can a human interrupt whatever it is that your AI agent is doing on short notice? That seems to be something important that I'm coming across more and more in terms of AI policies and compliance issues.
I wonder if it'll start to become more defaults in systems to have you think about those guardrails. I've been surprised how much it hasn't. And it's just sort of by edge case to stumble upon it to then say, okay, let's backwards plan for that. And the other thing that's really interesting, I wonder how will proliferate, is that as everybody is spinning up within a business context, all of these tools and processes and AI agents, because it's sort of custom to whomever is creating it. It's reminding me ages ago, someone on my team, we had too many Google Docs going on and there wasn't like a single source of truth and we didn't have consistency and they called it doc apocalypse instead of an apocalypse document.
Yeah.
But our doc apocalypse, and I'm wondering what's the AI apocalypse that is coming for companies that have embraced, adopted, and then need to simplify and come back to a more fundamental set of tools.
The professional services firms will get a lot of tools that will help them do the work faster. And there's a lot of business coming their way and helping organizations figure out how to manage all this. I just read a post this morning about a shared brain for AI. Maybe it's still an enterprise subscription to an LLM working on independent things, but you've loaded different source files and different instructions into it, then it'll come back with different answers. And so, like, how do you give it a shared context window? There will be work to be done by those professional services firms. Don't worry about them. They will still get paid.
But yeah, the dependencies that will be coming and reconciling of that, I think that it's maybe the heads up for our audience is if you have a say in it, try to encourage your organizations to think about some of those pieces of if somebody leaves the company and they own the tool, we are setting things up to point to certain files, which inevitably we are. Like, how do we make it easy to know if those files have changed, if we've deprecated them, to have those flags in place to make it just easier to support these systems?
Yeah. Well, Jess, I feel like we have had our dose of artificial intelligence for our audience of HR professionals, for sure, but hopefully helpful for our listeners on the way.